Peace to the mound builders of memory who've entered this sacred space. In this video, we're going to talk about how the true history of freedmen has been distorted, how memory maggots rewrote the record, and how the term freedman was weaponized against Aboriginal American people. But before we open the archives and unearth what has been hidden, I have to take a moment to honor something powerful that just happened. I have just reached 8,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. That's 8,000 memory carriers walking with intention, 8,000 voices helping to restore what was meant to be forgotten. I don't take this lightly. Every single one of you is a part of this memory mound we are building. And thank you so much for standing beside me in this digital council. We're not just growing here, we're restoring memories that have been erased from the minds of memory keepers who were meant to remember. Here's to every record cracked, every ancestor honored, and every truth restored. Now let's get into today's council session, shall we? This isn't just about terminology, it's about how labels were used to erase, exclude, and divide. But before I dive in, I want to offer a clear and respectful disclaimer. When I use words like Black, freedmen, historically classified Black people, historically classified freedmen, Native, white, tribal, or tribal nations, I'm referring to the social classifications imposed on our ancestors by outside systems, not how they saw themselves, and certainly not how we define ourselves today. These were terms used to divide kin from kin, to gatekeep land and belonging, and to serve legal systems built on control, not truth. We honor all lineages here. We do not engage in oppression Olympics, and we do not perform linguistic acrobats to appease every ear. I speak plainly and intentionally, using the language most people are familiar with, not to box anyone in, but to clearly trace how systems have used these boxes against us. If you don't identify with some of the terms I use, that's your sovereign choice. But this space centers historical clarity, not personal comfort. Our focus today is on historically classified freedmen have been treated and perceived throughout American society. And that story deserves to be told with full honesty. Are we clear on that? Good. Now let's get into it. So let me ask you this. What if the term freedman wasn't about heritage at all? What if I was to tell you that it's a tool, a paper weapon used to strip full-blooded indigenous people of their land, rights, identity, and their future? This video isn't just about history. It's about the blood memory, the gatekeeping, and how the Dawes roles in the Bureau of Indian Affairs were used to turn kin into strangers. It's personal, and I'm going to share why. On my paternal side, I have Choctaw ancestors who were listed as freedmen. I called the Choctaw Nation myself. I had the names, I had the records. I simply just wanted to know if the information I came across my family was legitimate and not a mistake in my genealogy research. The genealogist went back and forth with me, challenging birth dates and trying to create confusion. But when we confirmed the names and their parents, she hit me with the final word. Well, they are freedmen, so you can't enroll. Only by blood members can. And just like that, the blood memory I carried, the names, the stories, the lineage, was stripped away in ink and paper. not because it wasn't real, but because the gatekeepers rewrote the story to sever my roots and block my place in my ancestral nation. The term freedman wasn't a cultural identity. It was a legal status created by U.S. policies after the Civil War. It was meant to define people who had been enslaved by tribal nations, particularly the five civilized tribes. But over time, it became a racialized label used to exclude. And here's what they don't tell you: many people listed as freedmen had full indigenous ancestry. Others were phenotypically darker, and that alone got them marked. Some were kin to those classified as black, and their proximity led to paper reclassification. The United States government didn't care about identity, they cared about land. And if they could mark you as freedmen instead of a full blood tribal member, that meant you got less land or none at all. Before the memory invaders arrived, most tribal nations had fluid and inclusive definitions of identity. You could belong through birth, marriage, adoption, residency, cultural practice. There was no obsession with fractions or blood quantum. But after the United States started creating federal Indian policy, all that changed. Suddenly, tribal citizenship started to mirror the whiteness cult concepts of race. The Dawes rules became the blueprint. The BIA started supplying blood quantum charts, and tribes were pressured to adopt them whether they wanted to or not. Under the one drop rule, if you had even a trace of African ancestry, you were historically classified as black. But for indigenous identity, you had to prove significant blood quantum just to belong. Let that sink in. Blackness equal one drop. Indigeneity equal multiple documented generations. In the racial playbook of American history, hypo descent, also known as the one drop rule, meant that if you had even a trace of African ancestry, or just simply looked like you can pass as a black or African person, you were classified as black. Not because of culture, kinship, or even lived identity, but because of hierarchy. So, what happened to people who were both black and American Indian? They were almost always classified as black, even if they had significant indigenous ancestry. The only time that indigenous blood seemed to matter was when someone was seeking U.S. citizenship or federal benefits. Then suddenly, the system would flip the script, but only to preserve control. Now, here's the double standard. If someone was white and native, they were still allowed to be seen as Indian. Whiteness didn't disqualify them from tribal enrollment, land allotments, or representation. Why? Because whiteness is not a race, it's a membership, a social construct that can absorb others when it's politically useful. It was never seen as a contaminant, but currency. Mixed white native individuals were often used as intermediaries, giving white society access to indigenous resources, land, and political standing in ways they couldn't gain outright. This is why we see a long history of white people being adopted into nations or pushing their mixed descendants forward to inherit titles, lands, and positions of influence. Their proximity to whiteness was never a barrier. In fact, they became tools for the expansion of the memory thieves' reign across Turtle Island, while blackness erased indigeneity in the eyes of blood theft institutions. Whiteness preserved it and exploited it. Blackness became a gate, whiteness became a ladder. Tribes with land or casino profits had extra reasons to be restrictive. The fewer the citizens, the fewer who could claim those benefits. Take the Seminole Nation in the 1990s. When the United States paid them restitution for stolen land, only Seminoles on the 1823 rolls could claim funds. Freedmen descendants, many with real tribal ties, were cut out. The BIA allegedly even encouraged this exclusion.
Talk to Seminole Chief Jerry Haney. He says the black members are no longer welcome by many in the tribe. After 300 years together, the chief says the tribe wants them to either prove they're Indian or get out. What are you hoping that the black Seminoles will do now? Are you hoping they will just pack up and go away?
I would hope so.
So if they're black and they can't prove that they have Indian blood, go away.
Basically, that's what we're saying.
Harsh words from the Seminole chief for the 2,000 black members of this mixed Indian tribe. In response, they say they're just as much Seminole as he is.
I fished in these woods, I hunted in these woods, I went to stomp dances just like the regular Seminoles did, and I never knew I was any different for a long time.
On any given Sunday, go with Loretta Guest to the Indian Baptist Church in Seminole County, Oklahoma, and you'll find red and black Seminoles praying together, singing hymns in Seminole, sharing meals, and catching up on tribal news. Walk with her through the Indian cemetery out back, and you'll find their ancestors are buried together as well.
My aunt is next to him.
Were there any distinctions made as to, you all are the black Seminoles, we're nice to you, but you're the black Seminoles?
No, nothing like that. We've always been treated as one to another. No difference at all.
It was an alliance that began more than 300 years ago in Florida when runaway slaves and different Indian tribes sought refuge together and later fought the white man. Joe Opala, a history professor at James Madison University in Virginia, says that from the beginning it was a melting pot tribe. So these people all banded together and somehow became Seminole?
Became Seminole. And in fact, the word Seminole is not even an Indian word. It is derived from a Spanish word, cimarron, meaning runaway slave. And so from the beginning, you don't have an Indian tribe. It was a multi-ethnic coalition.
Historical evidence documents their close relationship. Blacks became chiefs, signed treaties, and served on the tribal council. They intermarried. They were equals, Opala says, and the Indians depended on them as warriors and interpreters. So there absolutely is proof of the black Seminole importance to the tribe.
Absolutely. There's a lot of intelligence information that passes back to Washington. For instance, General Jessup, the commanding general, writes back at one point to the War Department and says, the Negroes rule the Indians. What he was referring to was the fact that no significant decision was ever taken in the Seminole councils unless the black members agreed to it.
When the red and black Seminoles were forced out of Florida in the 1830s, they traveled together hundreds and hundreds of miles by boat and on foot, passing through this barren place on the banks of the Arkansas River all the way to Oklahoma. It was a long and difficult journey, referred to as their Trail of Tears for the many who died along the way. Now, nearly 200 years later, comes the $56 million payment from the federal government to compensate the tribe for those lost Florida lands. But the black Seminoles can't share in it because the government and the tribe say they were slaves of the red Seminoles back then, and as slaves could not have owned land. Joe Opala, who has worked to preserve their legacy, says that's wrong.
The black Seminoles fought side by side, died, bled for those lands in Florida. They've been together, they've been good brothers and good neighbors for 3 centuries. It makes no sense now to say they're not Indians.
Our ancestors were some of the most fiercest fighters during the war.
During the Indian Wars?
Yes, due to the fact that they knew if they were recaptured, they were going into slavery, back into slavery.
Bud Crockett and his sister Polly Gentry traced their Seminole roots back to their great-grandmother Dora Davis, who came to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears. But family legend and physical resemblance aren't enough. Today, you have to be able to prove your Indian heritage, which is hard for most black Seminoles because of something called the Dawes Rolls, a government census of sorts created in the late 1800s, which separated the tribe into the blood, or red Seminoles, and the freedmen, or black Seminoles. Intermarriage made no difference, as Polly and Bud discovered with their ancestors.
If you had any black blood in you whatsoever, you were a freedman.
So it didn't matter how much Indian blood you had.
Right.
Any black blood,
right.
You went on a separate roll.
Right.
And on the black Seminole roll, it doesn't list that you have any Indian blood.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel equal to the blood Seminoles?
Sure, at one time, yes. Still do. Still do. But the money and the government entered into the picture, everything changed. Everything changed.
If they don't have any Indian blood or prove it, then they're not looked at as Indians.
Putting aside that history of togetherness, the blood Seminoles are going by the book, that is, the government's book. They're relying on that 100-year-old census which separated the black Seminoles from the rest of the tribe in determining just who gets the government money today. For Seminole leaders like Chief Jerry Haney, this is what it now comes down to. Proof. I've met several black Seminole women, some of whom look Indian, and yet they can't participate in the benefits. They know they have Indian blood.
I'm well aware of that. The individuals that I know of that say that, you're absolutely right. They show a lot of Indian in them. But it's up to the individual to prove that they are Indians. And this is where the problem is. They can't prove it with the Dawes Commission roll.
What happened to your front porch? You have no steps.
No steps. No steps there, no steps here. And I need a whole house here.
Polly Gentry has lived her entire life on land her grandmother received 100 years ago as a full member of the tribe. All Seminoles, red and black, were given land in Oklahoma. Polly says she could use some of the $56 million judgment fund to repair her house.
My husband decided he's going to put some bricks around it, and he got, where's you see the bricks in now? And he had a heart attack.
And it's been like this?
And it's been like this, so you couldn't get nobody to fix it.
Do you have the money to fix it?
No. No, Lord, no.
So did you apply for a benefit?
Yeah, but they wouldn't give it to me.
The Seminoles have $56 million coming from the government, and how much of it did you want?
I want enough that I can get me a house built where I can live comfortable. Because it ain't no comfortable here.
This whole business of degree of Indian blood is just a concoction. It's just an excuse now that's been dreamed up of late in order to exclude the blacks from membership in the tribe. I can tell you this, 100 years ago or 150 years ago, Seminole Indians would not have been talking about whether or not this black person has Indian blood. It simply wouldn't have mattered. They were Seminoles.
For more than 100 of those years, black Seminoles held 4 of the 28 seats on the tribal council. But that ended at a meeting like this one in the summer of 2000, when the red Seminoles voted the blacks out. Sylvia Davis, who was one of the 4 black council members at the time, says it was humiliating.
It's been hard for me to sit there and listen to the way they talk to the freedmen. It's been very hard for me.
What do they say?
The racist names that they be using to them, calling them animals' names, cows, stomping feet, roaring at them, telling them to get out.
They don't want you.
That's right, they'll tell you to go back to Africa.
Why do you think the Freedmen, the black Seminoles, belong as part of this tribe.
We have people that die along the trail just like any other people in the nation.
But I guess they're saying, yes, thank you. You fought alongside us in Florida. That was 200 years ago. It's time for us to separate.
I would just let them know that we have all rights within the Seminole Nation.
But Chief Haney says many of the black Seminoles and even some of the blood Seminoles weren't interested in being part of the tribe until it included benefits, namely a piece of that $56 million government payout.
The tribe wanted to have an Indian tribe that was all Indian tribe.
There are too many freedmen.
I think there's a lot of freedmen out there now that are eligible to join, but have not joined because there are no benefits.
But you think if there were benefits for them, suddenly freedmen would be coming from
Yes.
all across the country?
Yes.
Let me tell you what it looks like from the outside, though. It looks like the freedmen fought wars, died with you, moved on the Trail of Tears from Florida to Oklahoma with you, and now suddenly there's a big pot of money. Let's exclude them.
That may be true to some extent, but I don't think that's all of the reasons for what has happened.
He also says the red and black Seminoles have just grown apart over the years and have little in common today.
This is how systematic disenfranchisement works. It's built into the policy, papered by the bureaucracy. We also need to talk about indigenous people who were enslaved by other indigenous nations. Long before African chattel slavery entered the scene, tribes took captives in war. Some became family, others were held as slaves. When African slavery became normalized, these systems merge. While some freedmen do have African ancestry, many are actually descendants of indigenous people who were taken as prisoners of war during intertribal conflicts. These ancestors were later misclassified as freedmen by white memory gatekeepers, who simplified their complex identities based on skin tone or labor status alone. American historian Taya Miles sheds a light on this complexity, emphasizing how identity among Indian freedmen has always been fluid and contested. She explains that the rigid racial categories imposed by the U.S. government often failed to recognize the nuanced realities of people with mixed heritage. Similarly, historian Barbara Carothamer, I'm sorry for not pronouncing her last name correctly, reveals how the legal and social structures established by the United States government, like the Dawes Rolls, frequently distorted people's true ancestry. These systems categorized individuals in ways that served political and economic agendas rather than reflecting their authentic lineage. Together, the work of Taya and Barbara shows that racial identity was not based on cultural truth, but was forced into narrow boxes for political convenience. So, the next time someone says, well, they're just freedmen, ask yourself, who put that label there? What was the agenda? And how many people were robbed of their inheritance because of it? Being listed as freedmen doesn't mean you weren't indigenous. It means you were excluded on purpose. May the blood memory keep you grounded. May your truth remain louder than the paper. And may the Council of Memory remind us we are not what they call us. We are what we remember. We are the whispered prayers of our ancestors' memory, rising like smoke from the fires they tried to extinguish. Deep gratitude to our keepers of the flame. Your light sustains this mound. You are the memory we carry forward. Yakoke, thank you. See you in the next meeting.